There's 7 in the evening, straight to the point, straight to the news. Bottom line, mein. Over to Zaka now for face-off.
Coming in from news coming in from the Supreme Court. What the court has said is regulating social media content will make us a surveillance state.
They want to listen in and collect emails. This is a complete propaganda tool in the hands of the government.
We are not interested in a surveillance state. There is probably a reasonable requirement for monitoring certain sections of the social media, for monitoring fake news from a law and order perspective.
Good evening. A few months ago, the Cambridge Analytica scandal made headlines worldwide, including here in India, after it was found that the now defunct political consultancy firm was using data belonging to about 87 million Facebook users without their consent. That news sparked a massive debate around the world on the violation of the right to privacy. The government here in India is proposing setting up social media monitors in more than 700 districts across the country, all in a bid to regulate content on social media. The proposal has once again sparked off fears of the right to privacy becoming a casualty in this bid to regulate social media. So today the Supreme Court stepped into the debate. It issued notices to the central government. The central government has 2 weeks' time to reply. Here's what happened in court today. The government says it wants social media hubs in the 700-odd districts across the country. The Supreme Court demanded an explanation from the government. Like I said, they've served notice. The government has 2 weeks' time to respond. The Supreme Court has also gone on to say that the government wants to tap into not just Facebook and Twitter, but also WhatsApp messages that are sent in different groups or between individuals. So the Supreme Court also observed today that this will be akin to creating a surveillance state. The court has issued notices to the central government as well as other parties in this case. It has sought the response of the central government in 2 weeks' time. But let's run you through what the plan is. What is it that the government wants to do? Much of our information, our news even these days, is consumed in social media. So here's what the government proposes to do, and ostensibly the justification is to try and monitor fake news, rumors, etc. Number one, social media monitors in all the 716 districts across the country. These will mostly be information service officers. Number two, monitoring of influential social media handles, people who can influence conversation on social media, people who have a substantial following, particularly on Twitter, upwards of 10,000. Number three, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and even WhatsApp. And this is where the interesting thing is, because WhatsApp is encrypted end-to-end. Even WhatsApp will be tracked by these social media hubs, by these social media monitors. Number four, using social media tools to listen in to emails, that is individual emails or even bulk emails, in a bid to try and see if there's something untoward going on or in the interests of national security. Number five, social media analytical tool to gauge public opinion, to try and monitor internet chatter on any issue that concerns government or policy or public discourse, and to try and influence that conversation in a particular direction. This is ostensibly the stated position of the government, but is this really, for want of a better phrase, snooping on citizens, or as the Supreme Court observed today, is this the beginnings of a surveillance state? If you feel strongly about it, and everybody uses social media these days, you're either on Facebook or on Twitter or on both, or Instagram certainly is picking up, everybody uses WhatsApp. If you feel strongly about this, if you feel that yes, this is potentially a slippery slope, this could potentially lead to the creation of a surveillance state, then call us on 0120-434-1895. Or if you feel the opposite, that this is the need of the hour, particularly with all the fake news that's going on in Twitter as well as in other social media, if you feel that this is indeed an idea whose time has come, then you can also call us on that number 0120-434-1895. A hashtag, you can go to Twitter and Facebook and also take part in this debate. The hashtag is no online snooping. The debate rages. As the Supreme Court observed, would this lead to the creation of a surveillance state, or is that an exaggerated fear? Will the right to privacy, as has been enshrined by none less than a constitutional bench verdict of the Supreme Court delivered last year, in the Aadhaar matter. Will that be the first casualty if indeed the government goes ahead with this plan of social media hubs and monitors? Let's try and bring in our special guests who are joining us on the talking point tonight. Here in our studios, we're joined by Taneja, cyber lawyer. Rohan Gupta is spokesperson of the Congress Party. Narendra, Taneja, spokesperson of the BJP. Mahua Mitra is MLA of the Trinamool Congress. She's in fact the petitioner in this case. We'll also be joined by Ankush Johar in just 1 second. But let me start with you, Mahua. If you could explain the rationale behind going to the Supreme Court and challenging this decision of the government. The government's defense is that, look, it's the need of the hour because there's a lot of fake news and rumors. We've seen all these cases of lynching happening on the basis of rumors of late. So it's the need of the hour to have some form of monitoring of social media. How would you respond to that?
Look, this is something that the government has come out with in the last 10 minutes or certainly in the course of the day, during the course of the day today. This is please understand what this particular issue is, and it's extremely different from what WhatsApp and fake news and all of that. They're two very different things. It is the BJP's propaganda machine which is trying to spin it in this to swing public opinion in their favor. Please understand what this particular issue is. This is a request for proposal which is a tender which has been put out by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. It has not been put out by the Ministry of Home Affairs. This is the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. What they're trying to do is to create a social media hub. And they have said there that in that they want to basically collect data from granular individual level. They want to use it to listen for and collect data from all social media platforms, including emails. They also want to crawl social media and World Wide Web for data mining. They want to monitor individual social media user accounts. And on the propaganda side, they say, how can the public perception be molded in a positive manner? How can nationalistic feelings be inculcated? This is something they want to have a real-time war room. 716 districts are going to be monitored and information fed in. This is nothing to do with tackling fake news or WhatsApp, in which case they should put in an anti-fake news legislation. They should bring in an anti-hate speech law and implement it. These are two very different things. Please understand. I mean, it's extremely upsetting.
What Mahua is suggesting is...
One second, it is... Please
one second. What Mahua is suggesting is, what you're basically saying, your defense of, this is actually to tackle fake news is a complete red herring, because she says that this is basically about controlling conversation, online conversation, snooping into people's emails, snooping into encrypted messages between people. That is surely, as the Supreme Court observed, the makings of a surveillance state.
Zaka, the problem is that Trinamool Congress is so rattled by the rising, footprint of Bharatiya Janata Party in West Bengal that they see demons where none exist. None exists. So it's a proposal from the Ministry of Information Broadcasting, and used to say, what they are trying to say. First thing first, everything is in accordance with the Constitution and within the spirit of the Constitution. Nothing ever will be done or can be done, can even be considered, which is violative of the privacy which is guaranteed by the Constitution. That's the stand of the party, that's the stand of the government. The Supreme Court, of course, said, we will be giving a reply to the Supreme Court of the issue. The whole idea is very simple. Whole idea is basically to have a kind of, network so that we can disseminate information about what the government is doing in terms of various schemes and plans and other things, and at the same time collect feedback from the people so that how can we improve, whether it comes to services, when it comes to subsidies, when it comes to support to farmers, and so on and so forth. And state governments will also be roped in. So wherever state governments wants to use the platform, so that they also chip in and they can use this platform.
Hang on. There are 100 ways in which you can do that.
Media.
But
how can the government can use this thing?
One second. Can I just make an observation? I don't think you can just brush this aside by saying that this is because the Trinamool is rattled, because it's not the Trinamool that observed that this is the makings of a surveillance state. It's the Supreme Court. So if you're saying that, then you should apply the same to the Supreme Court. Why should the Supreme Court be rattled by what you are suggesting or what you're intending to implement?
Listen, allow me. You see, Zaka, we respect what the Supreme Court has to say. We respect the Supreme Court. But as I said, the government response is forthcoming. Just wait. You see, the question is that, Supreme Court is probably responding to kind of arguments and the quality of arguments and motivated arguments some people might have made. So, but at the same time, I said we respect that. But what the proposal is, I'm focusing on the proposal. What is the proposal? That's the proposal, nothing more than that. And
okay,
there are
I'll tell you what the proposal is. I'm going to run this again for the benefit of our viewers. We've got Rohan Gupta here in the studio. Karnika Seth is also here in the studio. One sec. These are the 5 top things that they intend to do, and that's mentioned in the RFP. 1. Social media monitors in 716 districts. 2. Monitoring influential social media handles. 3. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as well as WhatsApp and emails to be tracked. Using social media tools to listen to emails in quotes, and social media analytical tools to gauge public opinion. Narendra says, Rohan Gupta, that this has nothing to do with snooping or looking into people's private lives. This is basically if people are worried about public delivery mechanisms failing them. This is a way. This is a feedback mechanism.
One thing, please.
Just one second. Let me just get the others also.
Can I come in on
just let me get the others also into the debate. Rohan and Karnika and Ankush is also now online with us. Do you buy what the government says? Do you buy what Mr. Taneja says? That this is just a feedback mechanism, no more.
See, first of all, the way Mr. Taneja told that it is politically motivated by the TMC and all, it's totally wrong. This is comment made by Supreme Court. And whenever there is a PI on this subject, Supreme Court's guidelines are very clear. Number 1, there cannot be misuse of data, public data, for political use by any political party. And what the things you have read, like reading emails, I don't think so that the purpose of controlling fake news can be solved by reading emails or putting analytics on individual social media.
What about bulk emails?
Bulk emails, again, you have to see what is the motive behind that. You can definitely check bulk emails if you want to. My point here is, if the government's motive is only to control the fake news, I don't think so what they are proposing is going only in that direction.
Okay.
And and the way Supreme Court has made the observations, I think it will be difficult for government
Karnika,
to justify the logic.
This is to control fake news, or this is snooping by another name?
Well, I've gone through the tender. And I seriously feel that when it comes to India, we have this as a fundamental right to privacy in the country, and only any restrictions can be put only if there are reasonable restrictions and only as per procedure prescribed by law. Now, when we look at that from that metrics, it is very clear that even in the IT Act, in Information Technology Act of 2000, we have very clearly laid out sections when a blocking is possible by the central government. If they have certain rules for blocking we have on the country, then when is interception possible? If that is there, I mean, even for phone tapping we have laws. We have POCL case in the past where we have clear guidelines.
Let me play devil's advocate.
You cannot do that unless it is for national integrity.
Let me play devil's advocate. Let me play devil's advocate. We have seen these instances of mob lynching on the basis of fake WhatsApp messages. How does the government control that? It's obviously fake. These are rumors. How do you control
We
that?
need a clear law on that, no doubt. I definitely endorse that. However, the kind of surveillance which is now transgressing, the right to privacy, it may be that the Supreme Court would finally hold. We don't know. We still have to see that to happen. But then when you look at the tender, the way the document speaks, the looking into the emails of people, the social media monitoring, having a knowledge center who does that 24/7, isn't it like a CCTV which monitors 360 degree every citizen? It's a question to be answered. It's a question to be answered.
Ankush Johar is the director of InfoSec. We also have 3 callers on the phone line. Like I said, this is a program of high interest, I'm sure, because everybody uses social media. I mean, this concerns the right to privacy of each and every individual. So we have a lot of viewer interest in this program. I'm just going to go to the callers in just one second. But Ankush, walk us through where you stand on this debate, particularly after we've seen what's happened with Cambridge Analytica, where the data of more than 80 million Facebook users was shared without their consent for purposes that they were completely unaware of, in a way to influence political discourse. I mean, after that experience and after that example, would a proposal like this stand the scrutiny of law, stand the scrutiny of the Supreme Court?
No, it cannot. I mean, I can tell you very clearly, this is surveillance state of the highest order, because what you're essentially doing is you're being able to monitor absolutely any kind of communication that's flowing through social media channels The government already has a very, very clear tap into every single voice conversation that's happening, which you know already, Zaka, right? And they have, obviously there's a law around what can be tapped and what cannot, but we all understand and know that it can be done, at free will. If the electronic medium now gets opened up thanks to this particular proposal, what it essentially means is you have full monitoring of what's happening in the country. It is surveillance state, I mean, in very clear words. We have precedents of this in the US. For example, the government got, do you remember the Edward Snowden instance where he discovered that the government was listening into everything, right? And I remind you just of that. This is essentially the license to create that kind of infrastructure and essentially legalizing that. If this were to go through, you're essentially under constant monitoring and constant scrutiny.
No, I'll ask the same question to you, and before I go to the callers, I'll ask you the same question that I asked to Karnika. Yeah. We've seen these instances of WhatsApp lynching on the back of patently false messages, rumors. People have died, and across the country, in Assam, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, wherever it is, you name it. How does the government control that?
See, I think, that's a very difficult question. I mean, there's been a whole debate around fake news in all countries of the world where, Mark Zuckerberg's passed multiple statements, and I can assure you there is no way you can have a law. I believe one of my other colleagues on the show had spoken that they're in favor of, anti-fake news law, etc., which I completely support as well, frankly. But it cannot be done this way.
Okay.
There's got to be other mechanisms. I believe Facebook,
quick.
WhatsApp, Zaka, one very quick thing. WhatsApp came up with this forwarding mechanism.
Any kind of attack to sovereignty or any serious, public interest involved, we can understand the law enforcement needs to have data.
Okay.
But not otherwise. That's how the law is.
No, but in the case of WhatsApp lynchings, people have died.
Yes, agreed.
I mean, that's a public security concern.
That can be monitored.
That can
be certainly monitored with a special law
without
on that.
These hubs, without these monitors.
Without the hubs.
Let me get some callers. We've got our first caller is Mr. Matthew. He's calling us from Bangalore. Good evening to you, Mr. Matthew.
Very good evening, Zaka Jacob.
Yeah.
I've got 3 quick points to be made.
Yes,
First up, I really appreciate the Supreme Court for scrutinizing this government's proposal. Otherwise, what would happen is this government will cross all levels of privacy of every citizen of the country. That's the first thing. The second thing, as far as it looks like, if there are 10 criminals in this country who use the gun to kill people, the present policy is that 1.3 billion homes, the homes of 1.3 billion people will be searched to see whether they have guns to shoot people in the future. That's the way the present thing is going on.
Okay.
And as far as fake news and other things are done, it is much easier to control. All that is to be done, to the best of my knowledge, is you have Google, you have Facebook, you have Twitter, every XY set channels and things. So what is to be done is, for every account that an individual has, let those social media have identity of those individuals. And when there is a fake news or something like that happens, then definitely the government can get in touch with these people and collect information and catch the pure person. As simple as that.
Okay, that's a great point. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Matthew. Mr. Ravi Bhatia is calling us from Kolkata. Mr. Bhatia.
Good evening. I just want to say that government's attempt to control social media is like imposing emergency via the back door. It is against our freedom of speech and right to privacy. The government is doing something which is very wrong.
Okay, thank you for your call.
It is like BJP, not...
All right, let's get one more caller in. Mr. Muzaffar calling us from Hyderabad. Mr. Muzaffar?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening, Raka.
Good evening.
Good evening, Raka.
Good evening.
Yes. I want to make my point that the government are making
Yes, go on.
Yes, the government is making a new law, but they are unable to maintain that law and implement on ground.
Okay.
And I am the victim of the online fraud from 2015.
there is an FIR with me from of 2015 from and 2015 FIR I am having, and they have done nothing till now.
Okay, thank you for your call, Mr. Muzaffar. Let me ask the question that the first caller asked, and I think it's a very pertinent one. If indeed you are dealing with the problem of fake news or trolls or bots, Narendra, Taneja, all you need to do is to have real identities linked to your Facebook and Twitter accounts. I mean, I know this government is happy to get Aadhaar linked with essential services and everything else. Why don't you just get everybody who uses a Facebook account or a Twitter account to link it to their Aadhaar? So we'll know who the real account holders are and who the fake ones are.
No. Question here is that, first of all, it's very important to clarify, because I don't understand where all these things are coming from. Freedom of expression and right to privacy, as far as the government is concerned, sacrosanct. Absolutely, there can never ever be any compromise, and I'll be the first one to oppose it myself. You see, it's important. Those who want to do political propaganda is a different issue altogether. The point here is that when you said Facebook, and these are foreign international companies, these are not Indian entities. So you can't really say that, look, you force them to, be part of this system or that system, whether it's Aadhaar or whatever it is. Moreover, that's not the government idea. The whole proposal is a proposal, by the way. The whole idea is just basically to be in touch, to disseminate the information and to collect feedback.
Hang on. I think you're being a little disingenuous there.
Or you open a Twitter account.
One second. I think you're being a little disingenuous there, because wasn't there a case recently in Europe where Google was fined millions because there was violation of antitrust laws, there was violation.
And it's come at a time when there are data protection laws being framed in the country.
Exactly.
How sacrosanct is our data protection law? I mean, this is what we are trying to strengthen.
The question is, they are doing something.
The irony of the situation is that we have a new tender.
Yeah, Mahua, the point is, I mean, I get that Google and Facebook and Twitter are all multinational tech giants, but ultimately, if you are operating in India, you have to follow the law of the land.
Zaka, I'll come in support of Mr.
One second, Ankush. One second. Let Mahua respond, please.
Just to say,
Mahua first and then Ankush, please. Yeah.
Look, I think you're. I want to first answer some. I put up my hand a long time ago. The BJP, I filed this in my personal capacity it's a PIL filed in my personal capacity as a citizen of this country. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that when I see where the discourse is being taken by the BJP, they're trying to make this a WhatsApp fake news issue. There exists laws already, and we are strongly propagating that the government bring in something in law to tackle fake news and to tackle hate speech, which the government isn't doing. This is not it. They're trying to move the discourse to again make this a this against us argument, which it's not. The second thing that they're trying to do, and this is the second spokesperson to say today, that this government wants to use this to deliver social welfare programs. Can I point out something in the RFP? I would suggest everyone, before coming on a show like this, read the RFP. There is something in there, Zaka. It says the repeated use of the word competitor. The software must measure the effectiveness and compare the performance of brand campaign with competitors. So if we are talking about this platform is only to be used by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting to monitor social welfare schemes, what are competitors? Where does the question of competitors come in? If you're a government and you're giving rations or you're giving PDS or you're giving subsidies of LPG, how do you need to know what competitors are?
Why do you see demons where none exist?
So in order to monitor social media, you don't really need to if you go the emails of people. All you can do is
I'm not sure that people who are dependent on PDS are necessarily on Facebook or Twitter, but anyway.
To follow the rules. Even China is doing it.
This is not the point.
Even if they are, I don't think this is the way to go about it. Let me get two more callers in. Mr. Raghavan is calling us all the way from California. Good evening to you, Mr. Raghavan. Now, good morning, I think it would be there, but welcome to the show.
Good morning, Zaka. Good evening, rather, for the team actually talking about this. I have a couple of things to share with, and I think people and English-speaking intellect are trying to spin it in the way of freedom of speech and things like that. I think we need to stop there. Okay. Number one, any architecture that we develop, any software models that we develop in this part of the world, which has got becoming smarter and smarter because of the technology and the upcoming technology that we embed in all those pieces. We always put a structure that is called diagnostic-based architecture, diagnostic-based software models and things like that. So there is a pre-prescribed boundary lines on which their architecture and software modules work, number one. Number two, because giving all that flexibility and opportunities for all the people to use it in a constructive way, in this part of the world, very seldom people will misuse it, because if they misuse it, they will be behind the bar in 30 minutes. But in India, people like Congress and TMC and all these fellows who speak only English in the channel, but they don't understand the social consequences and the impact to the people. Number three, big data is a big thing which is coming up. So it can be misused, it can be used, it can be misinterpreted in multiple ways.
Okay.
So there is a governance policy, there is a structure should be in place. I support your argument, there should be a structure in place, but that structure should be not violating the freedom of speech. That's it. And not asking for no structure is a disaster to India, because in India you cannot do anything. 65 years Congress screwed up this country, and India cannot progress unless until there is a data-centric model in India.
All right, thanks very much, Mr. Raghavan. Thank you very much indeed. Since Mr. Raghavan called us all the way from the States, let me just go through what the US does when it comes to, government agencies putting in this architecture, as he claimed, about surveillance and about looking into what people are talking about on social media. The National Security Agency, and Ankush referred to this a moment ago, National Security Agency allows access to emails, documents, users' data that is stored across major firms. Firms like Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, Apple, they all give the NSA direct access to specific users' data if asked for. Intelligence analysts have also searched through PRISM data to identify suspicious communication. This, of course, in instances of terrorism and national security risk. Analysts can also access emails, listen to phone calls, browse documents. If this is what the US follows, Rohan Gupta, and it's the biggest democracy, the oldest democracy in the world, as they claim, then why should this not apply to countries like India?
See, we have seen in past there is a leak of Aadhaar card here in India.
Yeah.
So data security is a big threat in India. The kind of infrastructure what we should have for protection of data, it has to be in place before these kind of things are put in place. So number two, as any PIL on this subject, there is always a threat of misuse of data by a political party. And we have seen the last point what you have told is to gauge the performance of the scheme. What is that? That is the promotion of your government. So what happens essentially, that government gets all data across country of all people sitting in the control rooms, and they can spread their news. Even today I am getting emails from Prime Minister's office. I haven't subscribed to it. So the point here is we are evolving country.
You're a Congress spokesperson and you're getting mail.
Absolutely, I am getting today.
Okay.
I am getting
That's
PM office's mail every day.
I think that's a reflection of them doing a good job. I mean, if you're sending emails to a Congress spokesperson.
Again, that is a perspective to be seen. What I'm saying is,
I'll get Ankush in 1 second.
I just want to say one thing, that long and short of it is, if there is a clear suspicion and there is prima facie evidence that there is something wrong happening with the user's account, only then should the law enforcement intrude and look into it.
I think that's a fair argument. Ankush, I mean, I'm coming back to the point that I was making. If in the US this is what the structure is, this is what the architecture is, surely you couldn't grudge the government for putting that kind of an architecture in place here.
No, so two things I'd like to say, Zaka. One is, one important point I want to make, which is you cannot, to the point of that caller, you cannot give Facebook your Aadhaar connection, because that Facebook is sitting in the US. We will have a massive issue on privacy from Facebook now if they're able to uniquely identify the government identity, right? So I do not endorse that at all. I don't think that's a disastrous thing to do.
Fair enough.
Okay?
Yeah, I think that's...
Second thing, the government should have the ability, so that's important to note. The most important thing I'd like to say here is that the government should have, like the US, should have the ability to get response from Google faster than they get today, or Facebook or WhatsApp. Today, those requests have to go through the MHA, by the way.
Yeah.
And only then Google complies or Facebook complies, right? And that takes a long time. What they should do is that they should have a turnaround time on any issues that they identify to be a threat to national interest. Okay?
Okay.
One important point. One more thing that I heard one of the, I think it was Ms. Mahua who said that there was an issue around, competitor tracking and, them propagandas through schemes, etc. The point I'd like to make there is there are social media tools for monitoring available outside of this surveillance issue that they're creating. You could log on to, 30 million such services, paid services, where the government can track that. So I don't think that should have been part of the RFP in the first place.
Okay.
Right? Because all of that you can do today.
Okay. Mahua, you want to make a quick point and then I'll get a couple of more callers in.
We have cybercrime convention that India is a signatory to.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
a huge problem.
Okay. Mahua, quickly.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So that's going back to, I think it was Ankush's point, that's exactly the point I was making, that this has no place in the RFP, and all of the things that we've talked about, if tracking fake news, this isn't the way to do it. If you want to cramp down on hate crimes and hate speech, bring in legislation and implement legislation to do it, and that's the second thing. And the third thing is that if you're going to, the NSA, for example, in the US, even today, law enforcement agencies, in the case of terrorism, in the case of criminality, law enforcement agencies do have the right to come in and do what is necessary. That every government does. You don't need a public RFP on the Information and Broadcasting Ministry's website to allow private, and believe me, they're inviting, this is inviting a bid from a private service provider who will come in. The 716 monitors who will be sitting in each of the districts are going to be employees of a private contractor. They are not going to be direct employees of our version of the MHA. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is, Zaka, I do wish
this was the plan that was initially envisaged. As I understood it, the 716 monitors would be from the information services, as many as possible, and the rest will be other grade B and grade C government employees. Okay, Narendra, Taneja, and then I've got a couple more callers, please.
No, that's not what it says.
Narendra, Taneja, and then a couple more callers.
No, that's not correct. The SMEs are to be, no, that's not correct. The SMEs are to be private persons employed by a third-party service provider.
Okay,
it
fair enough.
It says so in the RFP, Zaka.
Fair enough, okay, fair enough. Narendra, Taneja.
Can I make a point?
Yes.
Am I allowed?
Yes, sir, please.
Am I? You see, the point here is that first of all, if you look at the architecture that's being talked about, that is proposed, would involve hundreds and hundreds of private players, as the TNC spokesperson is saying. So which means that they will be, when you involving so many people, including private players, that means it's the most democratic and decentralized architecture you are talking about. And the architecture is so decentralized, is so democratic, then how can you use it as a kind of platform for the government to monitor or to intrude into privacy and all that? I mean, she is contradicting herself. She's contradicting herself.
I think the moot point, what she was trying to get at is, why should the government employ the services of a private company to monitor what is there in the public discourse? I mean, that idea itself sounds...
private discourse of private individuals.
Or private conversations for that matter. Let me get some more callers in. Mr. Sadiq has been waiting very patiently. He's calling us from Mumbai. Thank you very much for calling us and for your patience. Go ahead, Mr. Sadiq, please.
That's okay. Thank you so much, Zaka, for getting me in. Zaka, I have 2 points to make. Two very small little points to make, all right? Now, since the freedom of expression would be in danger with this law coming into picture, all right, I remember a YouTube video which I watched a year back when someone, I don't know whether he was from Bengal or Bihar, he criticized the PM for some of his actions. He was hounded upon, he was searched upon, and he was slapped and lynched, and a YouTube video was created and circulated all over. Who's going to guarantee the security of a person who tries to raise his freedom of expression after this law comes into picture? Because then it will be very easy to catch hold of that person who's posted that comment or everything. Secondly, with sarcasm, I would like to ask Mr. Narendra Taneja, if this thing is going to come into picture, what is going to happen to the Super 150 and the million followers? Are they not hitting the axe on the legs? In Hindi, as they say, apne pair pe kuladi maar rahe. If they are going to actually do that, what is going to happen for the Super 150?
Okay,
all right, thanks for that call, Sadiq. Mr. Taneja, quick response?
Surprising. No, my point is that, what your caller, Mr. Forgetting his name,
Sadiq.
Where is the freedom of speech? I mean, freedom of speech is sacrosanct for the party and for the government and for me.
Okay.
I mean, there is this is a political argument.
Okay, let me get...
Congress says it all the time, 24/7.
Let me get in a couple of callers, please.
Congress party,
let me get in a couple of callers. Nandini is calling us from Gurugram. Miss Nandini, good evening.
Yeah, good evening to you. Actually, my point out here is you're affecting the privacy of the people. If you have a fear of a fake news, why don't you make a law against lying instead of making all these things?
Okay. Okay, thank you very much for your call. Mr. D.R. Alex is calling us from Thiruvananthapuram. Mr. Alex.
Good evening, Mr. Zaka. See, I think the issue cuts across party lines, and it's about something integral part of an elementary right that the Constitution enshrines. I just want to make an anecdote about my visit to China. When I was in China, I suddenly had a bright idea to check up the reasons for the Indo-China war on Google. And ever since, I had no access to the internet at all throughout my visit. Okay? And this is what happens in a country. And this is India, and we want to have these kind of fundamental rights protected. Now, the BJP might be doing it with right intentions, but the way to hell is also paved with right intentions, you know.
Okay.
So I guess that this is an area which should not be treaded upon, and I'm sure the Supreme Court is going to take the right actions forward to solve this issue.
All right, Mr. Alex, thank you very much for calling us. Since he mentioned China, and before I go to our next caller, since he mentioned China, and I've lived there a few years as well.
Google and Gmail are banned.
Yeah, Google and Gmail are banned, yes, and so is
Gmail
Facebook.
Is banned, Google
so
is banned.
Facebook, and
China
so is Twitter.
Dictatorship.
So is Facebook, and so is Twitter.
For the information of your caller.
So here's, they call this the golden shield in China, by the way.
And so is freedom.
So here's what they do. For posting anything, users must register. They have to provide authentication. There is a number called a hukou number, which every Chinese citizen gets. It's equivalent of your social security number in the US. That has to be logged on every time you register yourself on any social media in China. The government controls all the internet gateways, traffic between China and the rest of cyberspace. There are mirror gateways that are created every time there's a click from China to a server that's based outside of China. Government firewalls, URLs, it blocks connections if they contain sensitive keywords. They scan images on messaging platforms like WeChat and Weibo, and social networking sites are blocked regularly if there is politically sensitive content. Like Taneja said, I mean, it's a dictatorship, it's not a democracy, and surely it's not an example that we should be following. We get one more caller. Mr. Derek is calling us from Goa. Mr. Derek.
Don't compare India with China.
Mr. Derek.
Yeah, hello.
Hi, go ahead.
This government motive is always suspect. If they are really interested in stopping fake news and lynching, why would the ministers garland lynchers and drape their bodies in the national flag? Secondly, the BJP spokesman talks about China. Now, China is not a democratic country. At the same time, China hangs those who are corrupt. Are we willing to do that?
Yeah, okay. I don't, like I said, thank you very much for your call though. Like I said, I don't think China is exactly the example that we should be following. But look, again, I come back to that point, Mr. Taneja. If your intention is to regulate or control fake news or rumor mongering, and we've seen, the disastrous consequences of that through these WhatsApp lynchings, all you need to do is to bring a law in Parliament, debate it and pass it.
First of all, Zaka, for your information, and you know it very well, when it comes to law and order or controlling this lynch mob and all that, that's a state subject under the Constitution. It's a state subject. And the center can discuss, but TMC for Trinamool Congress, they can come up with their own law. They can go to Facebook and say ban Facebook in West Bengal. Or ban Google in West Bengal like China.
Can I make a small point?
The question is that here, what we are trying to do is completely different.
Okay,
completely different.
I have a small point here. See, suppose government's objective is to control they can involve the service providers like WhatsApp. Government can definitely, and we have seen the news, that government has instructed WhatsApp to put in a system And WhatsApp, they can definitely do the system whereby the messages which are forwarded again and again, they can be tracked and the information can be there.
Color-coded.
Absolutely, they are doing now. So the way government is proposing this is by the same logic, they impose note ban in this country to take out the black money, and nothing has come out.
One second, one at a time. Let Kanika go first.
Even with the current law, we have enough provisions to take care of these things. However, it would be beneficial if we have
So do you believe this idea of color coding WhatsApp messages will work?
Well, it is a step towards bringing more security, more identification from where a message is originating or where it is being forwarded.
Ankush and then Mahua, and then I'm wrapping up.
But that's not the ultimate solution.
Ankush and then Mahua.
So, from a technology standpoint, can I just tell you very quickly, Zaka, that Facebook or WhatsApp, so I'll take the example of WhatsApp to begin with. WhatsApp can track that the message after getting forwarded, the origin of the message was here, was this mobile number started this particular trail of messages.
Okay.
From a technology point of view, because it's in the database. Okay, it's encrypted. Okay, so I'll just like to very quickly tell you from a technology point of view, it is encrypted, but the hash value they can track to say that this person started this message trail and it has now reached over 150,000 people, for example. Government should
can I just ask you something? One second. Can I just ask you something? Just explain this to us in layman terms, right? Let's say there is a particular fake information, right? A fake information that's originated from a particular number. Government or certainly WhatsApp knows where it's originated from, to how many people it's gone and how big it's become. But since it's encrypted, do they have any way of knowing what's in that message? Whether it is real, whether it is false, whether it's rumor, whether it could incite trouble?
No. So what I'm saying, the point I'm trying to make here is, so for the government, in layman terms, the government should have the right or ask for this right. For WhatsApp to operate in India, they should say, WhatsApp, you will give me the ability, if I tell you this is the message, I need the origin of this message. So WhatsApp cannot read that message technically, even though I can tell you that there is a possibility of that happening from a cybersecurity perspective, but I'm going to keep that aside. If I give you this message, leaving that aside for the moment, WhatsApp can receive a message, and so the government can say, this is the message I want the origin of this message. WhatsApp can tell you that the origin of this message was person so-and-so and this mobile number at this time was, and the reason why they know this is because the hash value of this message, Zaka, remains the same. Hash value for layman terms is, when I have a message, let's say ABCD, four letters together, when I put an encryption hash, that word ABCD will always have that encryption hash across the board.
I have guided
Makes sense?
I've had interactions with WhatsApp initially for some cases, and I know that if I tell them to stop a particular message from circulation, they are unable to stop it.
They're unable to stop it?
They are unable to stop it. And certain terms and conditions of their own policy. Their own terms and conditions.
If they're requested to stop a particular message from going viral, if it's fake and if it's known that it's fake, then they're unable to stop it.
Require government's
I think the government has to step
Absolutely.
in. They have to step
If it is a regulator, government says nobody can deny.
Zaka, I refer you to the situation which happened with BlackBerry and India, which then happened between BlackBerry and UAE, where BlackBerry was asked to bring the servers to India. So,
it can be done. Okay, Mahua, 30 seconds. Since I began with you, I'll end with you. Do you see this standing scrutiny of the Supreme Court? Is this going to be struck down?
Well, obviously, given that the first day, the bench made very strong observations and said that this is the beginning of the surveillance state, and that they've issued notice to the centre. They've asked for the senior law officer of the Government of India to be present on August 3rd to go through this. I'm extremely optimistic, and I think in view of individual liberties and civil liberties, this is not about the technicalities of WhatsApp messages and Facebook messages. This is not about bringing in, this is not about controlling hate speech. This is not about service delivery mechanisms, because other recourse exists for all of those things. Whether the government implements it or not is up to them. This is about a very broad-based surveillance mechanism on private conversations between private citizens and democratic
countries. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to wrap up completely out of time. All I'll say is, I guess, given what we've seen, the Constitution Bench verdict on right to privacy, we leave it to the wisdom of the Supreme Court, and I'm sure the Supreme Court will put this proposal through a fine legal tooth comb to really see if it stands the test of law. Thanks to all my guests. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back on the other side, as Pakistan and perhaps here in India as well as the rest of the world is expectantly looking at what's happening vis-a-vis Nawaz Sharif and Maryam Nawaz, we have an exclusive interview with Reham Khan, the former wife of Imran Khan. We've got a copy of her upcoming book, and she makes some pretty scandalous allegations against her former husband. That interview coming up on the other side.